Shalom Aleichem, Mishpachim. I'm coming to you with the second Aliyah, the second Torah reading of the Parsha Vayikra, in the book of the Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. Let us begin. We are in the second reading. All right. Starting with verse 14, ending with chapter 2, verse 6. Chapter 1, verse 14, ending with chapter 2, verse 6. Torah up here, Rashi down here. Let us begin. Verse 14, Torah. If his sacrifice to God is an ascent offering from fowl, he must bring one of the turtle doves or the young pigeons. Verse 14, Rashi, from fowl, but not all fowl, since it says, an unblemished male from cattle, sheep, or goats, implying that perfection and male gender are required for offerings among animals, but there is no requirement of perfection and male gender for offerings among fowl. I might think that even a bird missing a limb may be brought. Scripture therefore states, from fowl, but not all fowl. The turtle doves, older ones and not young ones. The young pigeons, young ones and not older ones. From the turtle doves or the young pigeons, the limitation excludes one of either species during the beginning stage of their feathers turning yellow. A fowl at this stage is unsuitable as an offering because it is considered too old among young pigeons and too young among turtle doves. Verse 15, Torah. The priest must bring it to the altar, partially nip off its head, and burn up the head on the altar. Its blood must be made to exude onto the wall of the altar. Verse 15. Rashi, the priest must bring it. He may bring even a single fowl. The priest must nip off. This teaches us that nipping the head is not done through an impediment, but directly by the priest. He cuts at the nape of the neck with his fingernail, cutting through the neck bone until he reaches the simanim, the esophagus and trachea, and severs them. Its blood must be made to exude. The term here is similar to the squeezing out of wrath, and for the extorted wealth is no more. He presses the place of slaughter against the wall of the altar so that the blood is squeezed out and flows down. Nip off and burn up, exude. Is it possible to say this, that after he burns it, he can then extract its blood? Rather, the verse is implying just as while burning the head and body are separate, so the nipping of the head is also done in this way. However, the straightforward meaning of the verse is that the order of the words is inverted. He must snip off the head and burn it up. But before the burning, its blood must have already been made to exude. Verse 16. Torah, he must remove its crop along with its entrails and discard its next to the altar on the east side at the place of the ashes. Verse 16. Rashi. This is the place of the waste, its crop, means it's with its entrails. Here denotes something loathsome, as in, for they become repulsive and staggered. This, too, is the sense in which Onkelos translates it, with its digested food. And this is also the interpretation of Abba Yosef ben Hanan, who said, he takes the gizzard along with it. But our rabbis of blessed memory said, he cuts an opening like a chimney around the crop with a knife and removes it together with the feathers on the skin. Regarding an ascent offering of an animal which only eats from its owner's feeding trough, it says, he must wash the innards and the legs with water and burn it up. However, regarding a fowl which gets its food from stolen property, it says, he must discard the entrails that have eaten the stolen food. Next to the altar on the east side, to the east of the ramp. at the place of the ashes, the place where they would deposit each morning the ashes removed from the outer altar, and the ashes removed from the inner altar, and from the candelabrum. All of them were miraculously swallowed up there on the spot. Verse 17, Torah. He must tear it open with its feathers intact, but he must not tear it apart completely. The priest must then burn it up on the altar on top of the wood on the fire as an ascent offering and a fire offering pleasing to God. All right. And that was verse 17. Verse 17. This is Rashi. He must tear it open. The term here, tearing apart, is used only when done by hand. Similarly, it states regarding Samson that, and he tore the young lion apart, as one tears a kid goat, with its feathers still attached, meaning that he does not need to pluck the feathers of its plumage. Refers to the actual feathers, but surely you do not find any ordinary person who smells the bad odor of burning feathers and is not revolted by it. Why then does the verse say the priest must then burn it up, in order that the altar appear satiated and adorned with the sacrifice of a poor man? He must not tear it apart. He does not break it completely into two pieces, but tears it open from its back. It says here regarding fowl, a pleasing aroma, and it says regarding animals, a pleasing aroma, to tell you that one who brings a larger offering and one who brings a smaller offering are equally pleasing, as long as one directs his heart to heaven. Verse 1. I'm sorry, that's not verse 1. Yeah, I'm sorry. We're over here. Verse 1, chapter 2. If a person brings an unspecified grain offering to God, his offering must be of fine flour. He must pour oil over it and place frankincense upon it. Verse 1, Rashi. If a person brings, the term is not mentioned regarding any of the other voluntary offerings except with the grain offering, for the following reason. Who typically donates a grain offering? A poor man. The Holy One, blessed be He, says, I regard him as if he brought his very soul before me. His offering must be of fine flour. One who says, I take upon myself to bring a grain offering, without specifying a type, brings a grain offering of fine flour. For it is the first type of grain offering in that it has the fistful separated when it is still raw fine flour, as explained further in this section. Since 5 types of grain offerings are enumerated here, and all except for this one are brought already baked before the fistful is separated, it is called the grain offering of fine flour. Fine flour. The term here always denotes flour made from wheat, as it says, fine wheat flour. A grain offering is never less than 1/10 of an ephah, as it says, 1/10 of fine flour as a grain offering, 1/10 for each grain offering. He must pour oil over it, over all of it, and place frankincense upon it. On part of it, he places a fistful of frankincense over one side of it. What makes you say this? Because the rule is that an inclusive clause followed by another inclusive clause is always exclusive. Another explanation for the difference, the oil is poured over all of it, because it is mixed with it, and its fistful is taken together with it, as it says, of its fine flour and oil, whereas the frankincense is put on only part of it, because it is not mixed with it, nor is the fistful taken with it, as it says, apart from all its frankincense. That after he has taken the fistful of flour and oil, he gathers all the frankincense that is upon it, and burns it along with the fistful. He must pour in place, he must bring it. This teaches that pouring and mixing the oil can be done by a non-priest. The priests must scoop. From scooping out the fistful onwards is the task. Okay, so I need to read verse 2. Verse 2, Torah. He must bring it to Aaron's descendants, the priests. From there, the priest must scoop out a fistful of its fine flour and oil, apart from all its frankincense. The priest must burn up its memorial portion on the altar as a fire offering pleasing to God. Verse 2, Rashi. The priests must scoop. From scooping out the fistful onwards is the task specific to the priests. From there the priest must scoop, even from the place where the non-priest that brought it is standing. This teaches you that taking the fistful is valid anywhere in the courtyard, even in the 11 cubits where the Israelites tread. Literally, his fistful. I might think that this means that it is full to overflowing. It bursts forth from his fist and comes out on every side. Scripture therefore states elsewhere, he must lift out from it with his fist. Only that which is within the fistful is valid. However, if it would have just said this word here, I might think that even an incomplete fistful is valid. Scripture therefore states, full. How then is a fistful taken? He closes his middle 3 fingers on the palm of his hand, and this is the definition of the term here in the Hebrew language. Literally, upon all its frankincense, means apart from all the frankincense. The fistful should be full just from the flour and oil. Its frankincense the priest must burn up. The frankincense is also burned up, a fistful of its fine flour and oil. But if he took a fistful and a grain of salt or a particle of frankincense came up in his hand with the flour, it is invalid. Its memorial portion. The fistful that is offered to God on high serves as the commemorative part of the grain offering, for thereby its owner his owners are remembered for good, and as giving satisfaction to God. Verse 3, Torah. The remainder of the grain offering will belong to Aaron and his sons. It is an offering of superior holiness from the fire offerings to God. Verse 3, and this is Rashi. To Aaron and his sons, the high priest takes a portion first, without any division of the grain offering, and the ordinary priests then divide the rest. Superior holiness. It is for them from the fire offerings of God, means they only have a portion in it after the placing of the memorial portion onto the fire. Verse 4, Torah. If you bring a grain offering baked in an oven, it must consist of unleavened loaves of fine flour mixed with oil, or of flat unleavened cakes smeared with oil. Verse 4, Rashi. If you bring, this refers to a case when someone said, I take on myself to bring a grain offering baked in an oven. Scripture thus teaches that he must bring either loaves or flat cakes, the loaves being mixed with oil and the flat cakes being smeared with oil. Our rabbis differ regarding the procedure of their smearing. Some say that the cakes were smeared repeatedly until all the oil of the log was used up, for all grain offerings require the use of a log of oil. Others, however, hold that they were smeared in the form of a Greek base, and the remaining oil was consumed separately by the priests. Why does Scripture state with oil twice? To indicate that the second and third grades of oil extracted from the olives are valid, while the first grade of oil is required only for the candelabrum, where it says, clear. We have also learned in Menachot regarding all grain offerings that are baked before the fistful is taken. Their fistful being taken by breaking the loaf into pieces are all brought as 10 loaves, and those described as flat cakes are brought as 10 flat cakes. Verse 5, and this is Torah. If a grain offering in a frying pan is your sacrifice, it must be a fine flour mixed with oil. It must be unleavened. Verse 5, Rashi. If a grain offering in a frying pan, he says, I take upon myself to bring a pan-fried grain offering. This word here is a vessel that was used in the temple, in which this particular grain offering was baked over fire in oil. The vessel was not deep but shallow, and thus the grain offerings made in it were crisp. For since it was flat, the fire burned the oil before it could soften the dough. All grain offerings that were fried require 3 placings of oil, pouring it onto them after the dough is mixed, mixing it into the dough, and placing oil into the empty vessels before their preparation. Fine flour mixed with oil. This teaches us that he mixes the oil while they are still flour, before the baking. Verse 6, Torah. Break it into pieces. You must pour oil over it. It is a grain offering. Verse 6, Rashi. Break it into pieces. This is written to include all grain offerings that are baked before the festival is taken, that they must be broken into pieces. You must pour oil over it. It is a grain offering. This is written to include all grain offerings in the requirement that oil be poured over them after the mixing. I might think that this applies even to the grain offering baked in an oven. Scripture therefore states here, over it. Perhaps I should exclude only baked loaves, but not flat cakes. Scripture therefore states, it. All right, and that was the